Well, I am going to bring us back down to the 10-foot, the crop dusting level, and kind of look a little bit more at Oklahoma in particular, because that tends to be what's most important to us, even though agriculture is now on a global scale, and it is very important what happens in Brazil and Argentina and all these places that Evelyn talked about, but we tend to be a little more focused in Oklahoma. I appreciated both of the speakers telling us that drought is normal, because we've been trying to say that for quite some time, and I'm going to show you why I think we started to believe that abundant rainfall was normal. This is March of 2011. This is what we looked like. I wanted to take you back and let you remember a little bit. March of 2011, we weren't real concerned with things. If you recall, though, it had been a very dry winter and ended up moving into a dry summer. March of 2012, some of us in south central Oklahoma that winter had actually caught a lot of rain, filled a lot of watersheds. If you were further west, you probably weren't that fortunate. But now take a look at March of 2013. Now don't read the text. I'm going to take you back through this one more time. Don't read the text. Just look at the entire United States. Just look at the picture. Don't even focus on Oklahoma. This is 2011, 2012, 2013. In about 1997, Hugh and myself started talking to people about drought. And we put on our first drought program in 97. It rained 3 inches the day before, flooded the streets of Ardmore. We had 6 people show up for the event. And I wish that happened today, Jeff, I really do. But, you know, Evelyn said something that I think is very important. We get used to the way things are. And when things change, we don't tend to adapt or adopt those changes very readily, because we want, especially if what we were living through was good, because we don't want it to get any worse. Well, just looking at this graph, the thing that strikes me the most is since 1985, we've had dry periods, wet periods, dry periods, wet periods that tended to cycle in 5 to 10 year periods. We didn't know why, Evelyn, in 97 this was happening. We were simply looking at this graph, and if you can see, well, I know you can't see it, but 97 is about the halfway point between that big blue hump when it stayed so wet. That's a 30-year wet cycle for Oklahoma, 1981 through 2000. And it was about midway through, we were just staring at this and looking at it and going wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, whoa, wet, 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 wet. And just thinking off of sheer probability it was going to get dry. But again, it's difficult when it stays wet. I will say in 97 we had started to see some interruptions in that wet cycle. Again, I didn't know why. I think now I kind of understand that was the tipping point of one of the major oscillations you've heard about today. So it started disrupting that constant weather pattern, and we started getting intermittent, very short-term droughts within any given years. And some of you remember 98 and 2000 and some of those years that seemed pretty harsh, but nothing compared to what we saw in 2011 and 2012. So I put a paper out on the table. I hope you'll pick up a copy, but the title of it is The New Normal. And I think we thought that was the new normal, but I'm here to tell you today, I don't think that was normal at all. I think that was an anomaly, an event that was a result of some of these teleconnections that they were talking about. And I really don't expect to see that event occur again in my productive life cycle. I hope I do. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope you will all laugh at me in a few years. So what is normal? What is normal rainfall? Anybody's rainfall been normal lately? I'm going to redefine normal for you. I mean, we look at this, and above the 34-inch average, 50% of the time, we have greater than average rainfall in Oklahoma, and 50% of the time, our rainfall is below average. Now that's pretty earth-shattering, but that was Aggie math right there. But I actually, one day at my desk, I had some free time, I actually counted all the little individual years and the little dots there and put this together, and lo and behold, 50% of the time we're above average, and 50% of the time we're below average, except for 2 years, and I didn't know how to calculate this in mathematically, so I just said one of those might have been a little above and one a little below, so I kept it average at 50%. But only 2 years have been average. So I'm here to make the case that normal is anything but average. Normal rainfall means more than average or less than average, that it is not average. I broke those probabilities down and show you the percent of the time we've had greater than or less than 5 inches, 5 to 10 inches, and 10 to 15 inches of rainfall for the state of Oklahoma. Again, the average is 34 inches, so from 29 to 34 inches, that amount of rainfall occurs nearly 30% of the time. From 5 to 10 inches below average occurs 13% of the time. That's kind of drouthy in my mind. And then from 10 to 15 inches below average occurs 7.6% of the time. So if we take those bottom two and say, yeah, that's kind of drouthy, and add those numbers together, then drought is normal about 20% of the time for the state of Oklahoma since 1895. Now, this is 2011 and 2012. What's most interesting about that to you? Look at the entire picture in the orange part of the scale. What's most interesting to me is that there has been 9 years in the past that we've had less than 25 inches of rainfall in Oklahoma, but the last time that occurred was 1963. Since 1963, we have not been very close to being that drouthy up until the last 2 years. But even the last 2 years, the rainfall was greater than it was in some of those other years. Now, so what am I saying with that? Well, I'm just simply saying that I believe we can see years in the coming 10 to 20 where we would get less than 25 inches of rainfall for Oklahoma. Now, were those prior years worse than 2011 and 2012? I don't know. I haven't researched that, because you and I both know that it doesn't mean a lot to say we only got 20 inches of rainfall. That tells me I'm below the year-long average, but it doesn't tell me when that rainfall hit the ground and soaked into the soil. If Creed Speak or Jeff Hammond or any of you guys could choose when you wanted your rainfall to come, and it came at the right time, 25 inches of rain, 20 inches of rain will grow a lot of forage. The problem is if 10 inches of that comes in January and 5 inches of that comes in August, we don't grow a lot of forage. But if we can get average rainfall in May and June, we can grow quite a bit of forage. Okay, you heard a little bit this morning about the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. Data looking back from 1900 to 2011, you can see it's cycling from north to south, back to north. This is the drought of the 50s and 60s. And you can see if you look closely what the PDO was doing and what cycle we were in the 50s and 60s. Here's what kind of we think of as should be normal, because it rained for 30 years. from 1981 to 2010. And there's that tipping point that Evelyn so eloquently talked about. So we are fearful a little bit that, you know, in 2006, 2007, this cycle has tipped, that the Pacific will be cooler, and it may last that way for a 20 to 30 year phase. This is a 40 to 60 year cycle, so it generally phases in 20 to 30 years. Well, looking at the Atlantic, wow. Look at how warm the Atlantic was in the 30s, and again in the 50s. Well, this is that new normal time frame I was talking about, 1981 to 2010, when rainfall was good. But here we are again, and in visiting with Evelyn, she kind of believes this one tipped in 95 to 97. So we've got this one working against us as well, potentially into the future. Now, this is going to be difficult for you to see, but it's also in the handout on your table, so you might want to take a look at it there as well if you can't see this, but I'm not going to get detailed with the numbers. I just want to compare the PDO with the AMO to Oklahoma rainfall since 1895. And when the PDO, and this isn't proper terminology, but I'm kind of a cowboy, and when the PDO was wet for us, that means it was warm. When the PDO was wet, back in the 30s, the AMO was actually signaling dry, and that gave us our Dust Bowl. And that was a high plains event. Far southwest Texas in the 30s didn't see near the severity of drought that the high plains did. Moving ahead to the 1950s, both of these were signaling dry. And I think, and Evelyn can chastise me later, but I kind of think this is one of the reasons she seems so confident that what we're seeing today is very analogous to what happened in the 50s, and why you saw those slides that she showed you, and why we think this may be a longer term event than we would like. There's the new normal, or was it, that occurred from 1981 through 2010. Both of these oscillations were signaling wet for a major portion of that cycle up until about 1997 when the AMO, 1995 when the AMO turned against us and went dry again. And here's where we are today. Both them again are signaling dry. Okay, just some quick words of wisdom here. The time to start planning for a rain is while it's dry. It won't be dry forever. Every year won't be dry. What are you going to do if this year's a real good year? How are you going to manage that? If it does get wet again, just remember too, the time to start planning for a drought is while it's raining. Ask yourself if your stocking rate's proper, given the information that you've been given today. You know, and as a general rule of thumb, I always tell people that you can run a cow per section per inch of rainfall. So if average annual rainfall for the state of Oklahoma, the long-term average is 34 inches, not the 37-inch new normal, but if it's 34 inches, then I can run 34 cows per section, or roughly 19 acres per cow. I would encourage you, because of the stress that we've seen in our pastures over the last couple of years, that you maybe even reduce that again and only run 75% of a potential stocking rate for the next few years. Instead of 19 acres per cow on native rangeland, it might be 25 acres per cow. Grass on native land should look like this in mid-June if you've got good condition pasture. That's about 60% of the growth for the year. That's when our plant growth occurs, is in May and June. That's when, by mid-July, we should have seen 75% of our warm season warm season growth. So if you want to inventory your pastures, start looking closely in June to see how much forage you have on the ground. And if you're not getting this forage in June, I can almost promise you you're not going to get it in July and August unless we get a hurricane event that sets up over the state of Oklahoma. Last May, I also took a picture of a place where, you know, that beautiful forage, everybody wrapped up hay, grazed cattle, made a wheat crop, whatever we did. But I took a picture of a field, and this is in early May, where the hay crop had been taken off and started looking to see how stressed the Bermuda was underneath it. I thought I would find more Bermuda, but I didn't. And what disturbed me the most, and this is in that flash drought time frame again, what disturbed me the most was, yeah, the Bermuda grass had been suppressed, but there wasn't any moisture in the soil, and it's already mid-May, and with that kind of condition, we were very worried that we wouldn't grow a lot of Bermuda grass. But the same thing's true, and I don't know what your stocking rate is in Bermuda grass. You're from all different parts of the state, so just pick a number. But you know, if you're used to running in that new normal time frame, if you're used to running, you know, at a stocking rate of 6 acres per cow, you might start thinking about 8 acres to the cow, or if you were at 5, maybe 7. You know, but I would be a little more conservative moving forward. And if you have good years, take advantage of those good years in a multitude of different ways. You know, get outside the box a little bit. Try to secure some reliable water sources. You know, whether you use solar wells or drill wells or clean out your ponds or construct some new ponds, but that might be one place you would look at improving. I wouldn't overlook drought insurance. I had Rafe and Craig help me with this, but looking back since 1980, the green and red bars you see are net loss payback with the USDA's Pasture and Rainfall Index insurance. And this is if we would have been insured at 85% rainfall and 150% production. And on the left-hand side, you see a lot of red bars. That means I wouldn't have even gotten all my premium back had I purchased that insurance up until about 1997. But even given that, the net payback for the last 30 years, from 1980 through 2012, would have been $31 a cow. That's not a lot, but still it's pretty significant. Sometimes in our business, that can be the difference between profit and loss. However, on our operation, 2011 and 2012, now this insurance wasn't available back then, mind you. It's only been available for a few years in the state of Oklahoma. But just in the last 2 years, in 2011 and 2012, net payback during these extreme drought times for our ranch was $222 a cow a year for the last 2 years. Now, I hope it's not that every year, because when it's like that, hay is pretty darned expensive, and it seems like other inputs are expensive, but that's a tremendous way to use some risk management in your planning in the future. So let me just conclude with these statements and tell you that drought is normal, and it's normal up to 20–25% of the time. I'm here to tell you that I think for Oklahoma, drought is going to be more normal about 30 to 35, maybe even 40% of the time for the next 5 to 10 years. Estimate your stocking rates based on long-term averages. Forget about that 30-year wet period that we had. Go back 118 years. But base stocking rates on long-term averages, not the new normal. Normal is not average. Normal when it comes to weather is anything but average. Normal makes up the average. So, stock conservatively, develop reliable water sources, take advantage of risk management through private insurers like Hargrove or your FSA offices with your NAP insurance. Keep the ground covered as best possible to make the most out of the rainfall you get. Monitor regularly everything, your inventories, your cattle numbers, your pastures, your water, and above all, have a plan moving forward.